And we're live and back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Good Thing, hosted by myself, Stefan, and my co-host, Jens. Jens, how are you doing today?
I'm good.
Can't complain. Are you
Oh,
doing better
oh,
than me?
almost weekend.
Yes, this is true. It is almost the weekend for you. The day is just starting out for me. But apologies, guys, if you hear a little bit in my voice. I've lost my voice because I just got married last week, and so I'm still recovering from that. It was an absolute blast. You're gonna ask me about my wedding, Jens? No, or we just go straight to tech topics?
Yeah, I forgot my script.
He's like, let me
Okay,
ask you
so
about the wedding.
yeah, how old are you now, Stefan?
27.
27. Okay, and yeah, how was your wedding?
Wedding good. Yeah, it was like a more of like a destination wedding, so like 3 day celebration, which is like more fun. We had people come out, and people have been texting me that it was just amazing. I've already been married though for a couple months, so and I've also been with my wife now 6 years, so nothing's changed on that front. It feels the exact same, but the party was cool. I really enjoyed seeing like my family and everybody there.
Yeah. What do you think in terms of, if you think about the relationship with your partner, how do you think, like, how impactful is, for example, moving together or starting a relationship or marriage or stuff like that? Well, how do you think about the impact of such events on your life?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I can actually relate this to startups because we talk about this a lot. Is that like your co-founder, when you're looking for a co-founder, it's basically like looking for like a partner. Same thing that you do in your life, and like when you move together or you raise around together or you just go through significant life events together, it's really important that you have somebody there next to you that understands you. And it's even better though if you guys are opposites, like a yin and a yang. So me and my wife, we're completely opposites. We're yin and yang, and I see the same thing in our founding team. Is that where I'm weak, our founding team is one of our founders is strong at, and where another founder is weak at something, another founder can complement that. And so with these significant life events, it makes everything so much easier when you have somebody next to you. And so Y Combinator is always saying like have a good co-founder. They say having a good co-founder is a seat like a hack. It's the same thing in life. Having a good wife or a good husband, it's a hack. You can handle any storm together. Having a bad co-founder is really bad. It's actually worse to have a bad co-founder than not having a co-founder at all. And it's the same thing in life. Having a bad partner is worse than not having a partner at all. And so that's kind of the way that I see it. I will say though, at 27, my wife has like changed my life in a lot of ways. I've been able to focus on startups. I've been able to focus on Wondergraph, and then I've able to just been kind of headstrong onto this. And so, if you can get married early, I really think have fun in college, but get married early. It helps you put your head on a swivel and really focus on the things that matter.
Interesting. Very interesting. You also said you and your wife, it's like yin and yang, but you still need some common ground, like, right?
So we align on the values. It's the same thing like with the founders. Like, why did we want to start a company? And what kind of culture do we want to build? And so with my wife, we align on the values of like what we want of life, how we want to raise our kids, where we want our kids to go to school. And so we align on those. But we're totally different. Like last night, she took me to a concert called 𝗪𝗏𝗏. It's like reggae, and I'm not big on reggae, but she loves reggae. But I really enjoyed the concert because she took me. And then sometimes I take her to concerts like 𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏 or like John Summit, which is more like electronic music. And she doesn't really love that, but she loves that I love that. And so we get cool exposures in life because we're different. But when it comes to the values, we're rock solid and we align on those.
Do you remember, like, on old computers with hard disk drives, like not solid state but HDDs, you had, from time to time, you had to defragment your disk? Were you born when we did that?
I think I was born, but I don't think I actually ever did that. Why?
No, like, I don't know, but when you were talking about the relationship between you and your wife, I was kind of thinking, um, my wife, she acts a bit like a defragmentation system for me. Like, I think without her, I would be a much worse human being, because I'm focusing like so much on tech and work, and I really need someone who drags me back to life and says like, hey Jens, take the kids, let's go outside. And like I really love the family and everything, but I don't know, somehow something inside me drags me to the computer or to my office, and I want to work on 𝗪𝗏𝗃𝗏, and it's good to have someone in life who helps you to realize, yeah, we're still humans, we're alive, there's not just work, there's something else. And yeah, I think having such a partner, it's a very good balance.
I would agree. And I think like I was talking about this with my mom the other day. My mom was like, wow, like yesterday I was on a meeting from 7 a.m. till like 4 p.m. I'm so exhausted. And I was like, Mom, like I usually do that every day. Like I'm on meetings every day, helping customers on board or getting new customers. But she's like, I'm so tired. And then I was like, I'm not really tired. And we kind of like talked about it. And it's like when you find something that you really care about, you can work hours and hours and hours and you don't really get tired because you care and you're passionate about it. And for me, like lately, I'd probably say the last year and a half with 𝗪𝗏𝗃, I haven't even gotten close to burning out, even though that we're working a lot of hours. And I think one, it's because we're growing. Two, it's because I really enjoy what we're doing. But three, I would put this as like my garbage collector is that Sophia comes and drags me out of the house and she's like, you're going to this concert. And I'm like, ah, like I don't want to. But then she's like, no, you're going. And then I go and I'm like, okay, I'm really glad that I went. I feel refreshed. I go back into today, like the office. I get to do a cool podcast and I get to go crazy. But I would agree totally with that. It's really important to have a good partner that understands you. And last antidote on this is I had a friend. He started 2 or 3 companies, and every time before he started the other company, he would have the talk with his wife, and he'd be like, "I'm doing it again. It's going to be hell. We're going through war. I won't do it. I can retire if you want, but let me know what you want me to do." And the wife was like, I know you'll never retire. You're going to do it anyways. So I might as well be there to support you. But I agree with everything you've said so far.
Yeah. Also, my wife is sometimes really helpful to like, I don't know, if I have a very controversial opinion, sometimes it's really good to throw it at your wife and not go straight to the team or to the founders or to the public. Like, just put it through the wife filter. Sometimes they are like, ah, like Dustin and I would say, like Dustin, our co-founder and CTO, he really cares about tech and good architecture, and I would say I also care about tech and architecture, and obviously we're not the same person, so sometimes we care about different aspects of the software and the architecture, and this can clash. And sometimes it's really good before you have an argument with someone, just say like, hey, what do you think? How will Dustin react to that? And this sometimes the wife filter can really help.
Yeah, it's like quality control. That's your QA is like, should I just go say this? And it's like, let me talk to the wife first. And no, I would totally agree. But yeah, the wedding was fantastic. Nothing's really changed in the personal life other than we had a great celebration. Family was there. But yeah, I'm happy to be back. Happy to be back on the podcast. And we got some exciting topics today. So Jens, let's kind of kick this off. You've been tweeting about this, but it's also been controversial. Like if you've seen Zig, the founder of Sentry, he's also been talking about it, is that a lot of VCs are really not OSS friendly, open source friendly. And one of the things that you brought up is how fantastic open source is for inbound sales. And so let's talk a little bit about like our OSS inbound sales notion and like what you think about it. Because a little context on it is that Zig said that OSS is good for VCs. This is the VC's point of views for seed and Series A. But around B or C, if you're not aligned with the VCs, they will force you to flip the camp. And you've seen it with HashiCorp, whereas that they flipped the licensing because they really just saw it as a funnel. But for us, I don't see it just as a funnel. I think one, it's a philosophy, but also an inbound funnel as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, that's a big topic.
There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I mean, one aspect is in the one core part of the Cosmo architecture is Cosmo Router. and Cosmo router, it's serving the requests between client and subgraphs, and it translates all of that. And it needs a schema, so we need a schema registry. So that schema registry in Cosmo, we call it Cosmo control plane. And these two components, for example, in Apollo, the control plane, it's GraphOS and it's closed source and it's just a proprietary service. And our control plane is open source. You can self-host and run it. And the Apollo router is Elastic license. And our router is Apache. And so let's say you work in a very big bank, or you work in a big FANG company, and you would like to federate something. You are interested in creating federated architecture. And then you know the legal guidelines, and people tell you like, hey, what's the license of that repository? And you look at the license, and you could use Apache, you could use like MIT, but if it's something different, legal will simply say we cannot allow you to use this. So now the POC stopped before it began. And the second thing is, like, we are developers, and one of our target audience, big target audience for us is developers. And so we know how we tick, and developers don't like to sign up somewhere just to try something out. And so one of the things we're actually looking at is, so you can already self-host Cosmo, and even if you work in a big bank, it's super simple for you to try it out and run it yourself. And the second thing is we're even trying to making self-hosting easier. And this, it sounds counterintuitive, because you could say, well, if we make self-hosting easier, are we not making it harder for us to get customers? Because like our managed solution, Cosmo Cloud, it's if we make self-hosting easier, then why would people sign up and do that? And the reality is, so first of all, the router is an infrastructure component. And one of our main goals is that we want everybody in the federation space to use this router as a base. And if you want to customize it, then you should be able to customize it. If you want to build custom modules or something, do that. If you want to run it with our managed Cosmos stack, that is great. We love that. We love to work with you together. But even if you don't want to do that, if you look closely, we have built the router in a way that you don't need Cosmo. You can just take the router and point it to an S3 bucket. And in this bucket, there's the config for the router, the execution config. And then router works. And so, yeah, we believe that if you really want to build the standard in an ecosystem, it needs to be open source, because otherwise you have these legal issues. And on top of that, it needs to be affordable. Like if someone wants to scale up and they have a lot of requests, you need to have a solution that works for everybody. So like at super small scale, it should be affordable, and you should have good analytics. But also, if you have like billions of requests per day, it should be similarly affordable. And yeah, we see with alternative products, these values simply don't align. And for us, I would say one of the most interesting observations, we didn't think about that in the very beginning, is but one big observation is, when you make it open source and you have a really powerful managed solution with value, with a lot of value added, what happens is people in a big bank, they try it out, they do a POC even without talking to you because it's too complicated. They do a POC, and then if everything goes well, they say like, okay, POC was great, we love your tool, we would now do a POC with your managed solution because we don't want to host the whole Cosmos stack. It's too complicated for us. And then they start legal process, security validation, and all this kind of stuff. And what is so cool about this motion is we didn't do any selling. It's really just them coming to us and saying, hey, we love your open source router. We have set it up. It works. We have a small project. Can you now help us get into production? And that's the sales pro. It's not top down. It's a great bottom up motion that gets us access to super big companies, and yeah, we're super happy with that. Anything
There's
you
a
want
lot.
to add?
Not add, maybe after, but I want to like just kind of dive deeper into it. So like full transparency, like we did the same approach with the SDK. You remember it was fully open source, but why? Like full transparency, like we made some money off of it. It was okay, and then we tried to build a cloud on top of it. But again, what's the main difference between why now with Cosmo is we're making 100x more money than we were with whatever with the SDK, but they were both open source. We kept the same notion, and I'll never forget this point where when we were pivoting, we were like, Jens was like, we need to make it fully open source, and we were all like, but we just did that. It didn't work. And he's like, trust me, we need to make it open source. Just trust me on this. Why did you come up with that? Like, you had that thinking a year and a half ago, and it ended up being right. Is it the same intuition that you have now, too, to make it even easier to self-host? And what was the difference between the SDK and Cosmo, especially in terms of revenue?
So the SDK allowed you to define API dependencies, glue them together. So you could say, here's a Postgres database, here's a REST API, here's a GraphQL API, glue them all together into a single unified GraphQL schema, and then expose that as an API. Cool tool, was a lot of fun to build. Problem, I would say the impact radius of the solution, and that is like super important concept, impact radius of the solution is single person or single team. This is not a multi-team solution. And so if you want to sell to enterprises and you want to make money, there needs to be more impact than single person, single team. Like big budgets in enterprise, you don't have big budgets for one dev can create an API faster. That is, no, it needs to be something like all people across 20 teams, they can work more efficiently together, or they can build an API together with federation, for example. That's one aspect. Okay, this radius, and the second aspect is kind of what we figured out is you have solutions that are in the infrastructure bucket, and you have solutions that are in the collaboration bucket. Like Cosmo Router, it's infrastructure, and Cosmo Studio, where you have schema checks, where you have, for example, our playground with an explorer of the schema. One feature we recently added in the explorer, you can see if you need to be authenticated, if you want to use a field, and if it needs authentication, what scopes are required. So API discovery, sharing APIs, sharing knowledge. Then we have the playground where you can look into query plans. You can understand how would the query planner work. Then other features we have in the studio, for example, is our cache warmer, where we look into what are the queries you were using for the last month or so, and then we build a top list of queries and how long it takes to plan them. So we have that as an analytics add-on, and from this information we create a top list of queries, put this into our CDN, and when you boot up a router or when a router gets a new config, then we warm up the caches, reducing the query planning time for the router. This, for example, is a solution. This helped one of our customers go through a Super Bowl event where they had traffic spikes, but thanks to the cache warmer, they didn't have query planning spikes because the caches were warm. So these are like value add-ons, and it's super important that your managed solution has value add-ons in the collaborative space. For example, one critical feature of collaboration is if one subgraph introduces a change, we will check that this is not breaking any of your clients. So that means by having such a platform, you can now have many teams that make subgraph changes and nobody is breaking existing functionality. So now more people can be added to creating services. So that's a big collaborative value add versus one single team builds an API faster.
No, yeah, I think you're spot on with that. Is that a lot of developer tools, what they do is they try to solve a problem for an individual developer. But really the power is actually in when you get it into access to teams and enterprises, because they're collaborating across teams as well. And I think you kind of sum up perfectly of like what the difference was between the SDK as well as between Cosmo. And then go
can
ahead.
I add one example?
For sure.
Prisma. So an ORM, I think Prisma for many years is trying to figure out the business model. And if you like, this is not something we make public, but we have like a product vision picture, like our North Star, how the ecosystem of 𝗪𝗏𝗃 should look like in the future. And one key aspect is open source is good, but it's super important that an open source component is embedded into a much bigger product vision, where there are other products that are in different categories, like collaboration, for example, with much bigger enterprise impact. And so, yeah, you need to think like in an ecosystem. And for example, for us, Cosmo, it is one step. Like that's one piece of the puzzle, or a couple pieces of the puzzle, but there's a lot more around that, and that's in the end makes the strategy work. But our understanding of the market is that an API gateway, the goal needs to be to make it virtually free. Like our long-term vision for federation routing is to make it more or less free. Like, okay, it will never be free. It has a cost, and there needs to be a schema registry, and there needs to be analytics, because otherwise we cannot do breaking change detection. So there will be some cost. But for Cosmo, for the router, and for analytics, like our long-term goal is to actually drive down the cost.
Yeah, and I think it's a great model, and I think all successful companies eventually realize this. So you mentioned Prisma is maybe not the best example, but what are some companies in your opinion that do this really well? For me, I think 𝗪𝗪 does it great with Next.js. They made their framework open source and free, but the value really comes from the collaborative platform of 𝗪𝗪. Neon also does a good approach on this. What are some good open source companies that have kind of nailed down this approach that you like?
Yeah, I like 𝗪𝗪, and I think 𝗪𝗪 also transitioned a bit. You know, if you remember, like 𝗪𝗪 2 years ago, everybody was like, "Oh my God, it is so expensive," and the new 𝗪𝗪 is implementing new techniques to drive down compute cost, and everybody is like super positive about that, and yeah. And then at the same time, you can actually see, it's funny how you see these parallels. So 𝗪𝗪 is looking at driving down the hosting cost of your website, and at the same time, they build these AI features that allow you to create designs and other things. And what is designing at the end of the day, it's collaboration again, because you have a website and you want to show
𝗍𝗏.
someone like, hey, here's a new idea. So back in collaboration, and I think, like, you know, in infra, like something like the router, it's typically like low margin markets, because like people have a lot of requests, and then like, let's say you have like a social media platform of sorts. That means you have a lot of free users where you need to make money, and then compare that to a collaborative tool like V0. You have developers. They are one of your most expensive assets, and you can give them at like enhanced superpowers with AI. And so that is something where you're happy to pay more because you get more value. But for the router, for each request, like billing per request, at least billing, or if your sole business model is to bill per request, it's got to be tough.
Agreed. And a little story that I had is I was recently talking to like a procurement officer, helping them onboard onto Cosmo. And one of the things he said during the procurement is that, hey, we're not buying like a Slack or a Zoom or a, what do they use? I think they use Monday.com or Jira. And if you look at all those tools, what those tools allow is collaboration across the company. Without Zoom, they wouldn't be able to meet with remote workers. Without Slack, they wouldn't be able to communicate. Without Jira, they wouldn't be able to organize the tasks. And when you look at that, especially from what we've seen in the market, is that companies' biggest assets are their employees. And then the second biggest assets are the tools that they use to collaborate, especially post-COVID in a remote environment. And infra is very tricky. You don't want to charge per usage. But a little secret hack that we've seen is per seat models or collaborative tools. People are like, yeah, that's fine. As long as we can collaborate and work together, that's totally fine. We'll definitely pay the price on that. And I think it's an interesting learning. It took us a while, but when you look at it in hindsight, me and Jens are like, how could we be so dumb? Like, it makes total sense. Any final thoughts on that one, Jens?
You have this quote from, I think, Jeff Bezos. Do you remember?
Your margin is my opportunity.
Yes. Like, and I think in infra, if someone creates a proprietary product with a high margin that is billing per traffic, then you can set a counter, and someone will build an open source alternative, and they will create an alternative model where self-hosting works in some way, or where there are incentives better aligned for people with high traffic. And yeah, which is one of the reasons we said, like, or you know, I still remember, like 1.5 years, or no, I think it's now 2.5 years ago. I was on vacation, and I was, you know, every time I go on vacation, I'm thinking outside the business.
It helps.
And I came back, and I told Stefan, no, I actually went on a call. Like, I called you guys because I was like calling my co-founders and said, guys, we will make Cosmo open source 100%. And we were debating, like, you can't do this, like, we're giving away everything and so on and so forth. But I was like, you know, I don't want to build this whole platform and router and everything, and then someone comes around the corner and says, open source, you know, we say open source alternative to Apollo router, and then we make the control plane closed source, and then the next guy comes around and says open source alternative to Cosmo control plane. And I'm like, no, I don't want this to happen. Like, I want everybody to use it like they want. And I think our cloud service needs to be much more powerful, and it needs to give much more value than just Docker Compose up. And, you know, like these days, if you look at our cloud stack, there's ClickHouse, there's database migrations. We now have our telemetry pipeline hosted in multiple regions. It's highly available. We have the CDN hosted, highly available in multiple regions. We have internally, we now use Kafka to ensure that we have high throughput processing of the telemetry pipeline with back pressure and all these kind of things. It's such a complex stack. For most customers, it's just so much easier to talk to us. We figure out a pricing strategy that works for everybody, and that's so we're not just running Cosmo, we're doing more, and it's a complex stack. And the question, if you really want to self-host, is do you want to own all these components, or do you want to use them? But there's one thing, because it's open source, it kind of establishes a level of trust, because
Yes.
even if we in the future, driven by VCs or whatever, even if we decide to change course, which I don't intend to do, because we have a different strategy that goes beyond Cosmo. But even if we would, you can self-host Cosmo. And I think also, if you could self-host something, it somehow sets a threshold of how hard can you squeeze a customer. And I think this aligns our values better with the customer values. Like, if you can self-host something for, I don't know, let's say 1 million per year, and we're charging you 50 million, something is wrong, completely wrong. And by making it open source, we kind of set a threshold to ourselves of playing fair, and to be honest, I think that's good.
Yeah, and I think those are, I mean, I agree with all of those, and I think the benefit of open source is definitely on the procurement side, but also, I had this conversation with my mom. Like, at first, I had to explain to her what Cosmo does, using the waiter example, and then once they got that, they were like, "Well, how can you sell something that's basically free?" And I was like, "Mom, like, the moat isn't actually in the software, it's in the knowledge and the experience of running it, but also the knowledge and experience that we bring from all of our customers." And what I love the most about our customers is they love what they do, and we get to work with some amazing talented engineers, but they're also open to meeting with other customers. So when we have a customer that's using EDFS or subscriptions, we can take that knowledge, take it to another organization, and then they become successful with subscriptions. And that's only possible, I really think it's only possible through open source. And this past week, we announced a really cool customer, which I want to dive into this topic a little bit. So I'll actually bring up, let me share my screen so people can see the blog post.
Can I add one thing to this mode part?
Yes, before I share, go ahead.
So this week, a customer came to us and said, we're using your, so our router has a feature to upload files using multi-part.
Yeah.
And they were not exactly implementing the spec. They wanted to send the requests slightly differently. And they said, we don't have the resources to change all our clients. Can you add a feature flag, or can you somehow help us how to accomplish that? And here's the thing. People have business goals. Like, your business goal is not to host Cosmo. Your business goal is to find a partner that helps you get this thing working. So ultimately, there are a lot of people you don't really have to convince them to use the service or partner up with us, because they are busy and they want help. So yeah, we're not so worried about making something open source.
If you remember the guy from Suit Supply, when we first started talking to them, so they were evaluating Cosmo, but then they ended up not even going with GraphQL. But we were talking with this guy, and he goes, "I'm not in the technology business. I'm in the retail business." He's like, "I just buy software to get the job done." And I remember that always stuck with me, because some people are in the technology business like us, other people are in whatever business that they're in. But if it solves a business goal, are you really in the business of hosting, building your own gateways? It's cool, it's great. And if that's something you want to do, you should really consider applying to WonderGraph, because that's what we do. But if you're at a bigger company and they're making you build gateways, there's a lot that you don't even know that you don't know. And there's a lot of use cases and edge cases you haven't even thought of yet. But if that does interest you, we are hiring across the board. So take a look at some of our open job sites. But Jens, with that in mind, I wanted to transition into this amazing graphic that we have. So this was written by Brendan, our technical content writer, and this is probably one of the customers that I'm the most excited about. So SoundCloud, we've been working with them for how many months now? 4 or 5 months?
Yep.
I'd say so. And for those of you that aren't familiar with SoundCloud, SoundCloud is a very strong engineering team, extremely strong. They're the creators of Prometheus, they're the creators of the BFF framework, and they've kind of migrated over to GraphQL Federation. We work very closely with their team. Their former CTO, 𝗪𝗵𝘁𝗁𝗃, he will be joining us on the podcast in a couple of weeks. So it'll be great to have some questions beforehand about what it's like to be a CTO. He's been a CTO at multiple companies, and he's also was the CTO at SoundCloud. But Jens, this was super exciting. From a tech point of view, I mean, the headline is a banger. They cut their computing cost by 86%. Walk me through a little bit from the beginning and, keep the details high level, but this was a really exciting use case that we had with SoundCloud. Also, the graphic is my favorite, but basically the TLDR is they cut the infrastructure cost by 86%. And when we estimated it with them, this was about 265,000 in annual savings on AWS Fargate. And then with Cosmo and Cosmos Studio, they were able to improve the query latency by 45%. So there was performance improvements all across the board. Do you have any thoughts on that? You worked very closely with the tech side. I worked mostly on the procurement side. But tell us a little bit on the insides of what we did with SoundCloud, why it was so exciting, as well as, the partnership with them was just fantastic.
Yeah. So first of all, the engineering team of SoundCloud is really smart, and it's a lot of fun working together with them. They have a lot of scale, and for someone like us creating a router and this whole infrastructure, it's always super useful to have very tech savvy people on the other side of the table, because they bring the scale, they bring the use cases and the operational complexity, and we bring the tech, we bring the solution, and together we get insights into, okay, what happens if you throw billions of requests at Cosmo Router? What are the pitfalls? What can go wrong, and how can we improve the product? So we always love these kind of relationships, because they are definitely a power user, and they help us to make it better. And then at the same time, so they migrated from a Node.js based gateway. And as we all might know, Node.js being single threaded, and just by the nature of the architecture, has some limitations in terms of how it can handle throughput and other aspects. And we know that quite a lot of people in the market are still on Node.js based GraphQL Federation gateways. So what you can expect by migrating to a Golang based router with query plan caches and many other improvements is, first of all, you get a lot more bang for the buck. So we get more throughput out of a single instance. Deployments are much easier because our router is it's working multi-threaded, so it linearly scales with the number of CPUs. So we did some benchmarking with customers, where we found that if you double the number of CPUs, you double the amount of throughput you get. And so that means you don't have to deploy hundreds of single CPU pods on your Kubernetes, but you can actually deploy instances with 4 or 8 CPUs. So it's less complex to handle. And then the architecture is just faster and more efficient. So that means we get more requests per watt, per power. So that means overall you can deploy much less instances. In case of SoundCloud, 86% savings. And then on top of that, because the component, the router, is more efficient, We also decrease latency. So the single request, we're serving it faster. And now SoundCloud's bottleneck is the subgraph, so the service behind the router. And that's something we see quite often.
Yeah.
We had another customer who did a POC, and as part of the POC, they did heavy benchmarking. And if you set up, or if you give Cosmo enough resources, then you're actually measuring your subgraphs, because Cosmo is faster than your subgraphs, because we have so heavily optimized it. And yeah, so overall, it's a great relationship with SoundCloud. In the beginning, we collaboratively built a library where you can send analytics data from your Node.js based GraphQL gateway or Node.js based GraphQL server to Cosmo, which is pretty cool, because you might have the issue during the migration that you want to use both services for a period of time, so that you can serve some traffic here, some there. And then when you move to Cosmo, you want to have breaking change detection based on traffic. So if you don't yet run on Cosmo, you would lack this kind of data. So we build a library that can send analytics data from a Node.js based gateway to Cosmo. And so you can kind of warm up the analytics database and then make the switch. So yeah, I think that's mostly the SoundCloud story.
Yeah, and it was fantastic collaboration all around. And what was cool is there's a quote in the case study is like, they're the creators of Prometheus or the creators of the BFF framework, and they scoped out and they were like, we don't want to build our own gateway. We should just partner with someone that's done it before. And it's exactly what happened with SoundCloud. And we also have more exciting features coming soon. So I'm happy that they're a customer. I use them daily. I actually am a pro user of SoundCloud. That's where I find all my new music. So check them out. Also check us out if you're interested in partnering up with us. But Jens, okay, let's go through a little bit. There's some spicy topics on here. We have to keep the last one for the end. But talk to me a little bit about what you've been seeing from these REST connectors. So obviously Apollo is pushing these out. There's other vendors in the space that are trying to like adapt it. And I don't know. I know your thoughts on it, but to me, it just doesn't feel right. And I'd love to know from you, why doesn't it feel right? And we've looked at the examples. It goes back to that model of charging per request, and that this might just be a gateway to just charge more per request. But what are your thoughts on these REST connectors that are coming out into the GraphQL space?
Yeah, so I understand the motivation, or I think I understand the motivation. You have existing REST APIs and you want to bring them onto the graph. And yeah, ideally you don't have to maintain extra subgraphs. You can just write a bunch of directives and now it's on the graph. And I think for super simple use cases, it's probably gonna work, or even for medium advanced use cases, it could work. But at the same time, what I see is, okay, you write these descriptions, you describe how to get the data from a URL, and you also you describe how to probably map it. And the issue here is the examples we see, they go like, okay, you go to a URL and back comes a JSON, and then we map this JSON. And this is not the reality. The reality is, if you have well-designed REST APIs, a REST API can return anything. I don't know, like it can return a 200 okay, it can return a bad request, it can return 404, 401, it can return all sorts of status codes. It can also return unions or combinations, like, there's one off or any off, like these directives in OpenAPI. And a REST API can also have a field that acts like a discriminator, and based on this field, the response shape will look differently. Like it's open API, it's JSON schema, so it can get super complex. And so far, the examples I saw is just, yeah, URL, you get one thing back, super simple, and that's it. And I don't know, it's not realistic. I think what is much more realistic is that you need a lot more code to handle different cases. And then there's the question, if you write these directives, you need to have a process of getting this into production. So how do you test that the directives properly describe your API? And then in the future, if the API changes or you need more features, it means you need to change these directives. And once they are changed, you need to test again that it works. And what I have seen in demos is we create these directives, then we open the playground and we make a test request. And now we see this works. Okay. Yeah, that's not how we do CI. We do CI by running a test framework of sorts. So if I can only describe the schema with directives, how do I write my tests? Because in the end, I need to write code to run a test framework. So if I write code for the test framework, can I also just write code for the resolvers? And then I can do all sorts of mapping and everything. And the other thing is, all of this is super easy if we're talking about GET requests. But what about patches? What about posts? What about mutations in general? Like you can't, if you have a well-designed REST API, you can't just map a GraphQL input to a JSON patch object or posts. If I make a post and I open the playground to test it, then I'm mutating data. So now I need a mock or like, and how do I do all of this? So I don't know. It doesn't feel right for me. To give you an example, Stripe. If you want to integrate with Stripe, there is a component that Stripe offers where you can set up a Stripe mock locally, because nobody wants to run tests and send money via Stripe or create transactions. You want to run this against a mock, so you need a valid Stripe mock of sorts, and you can run this locally or in your pipeline. So you need orchestration code to run this Stripe thing, and yeah, I don't know. So I don't want to say it's 100% bad. I understand the desire. It needs to be easier to bring REST and other legacy APIs onto the graph. And at the same time, and like, you know, it's competition, but I think my biggest pet peeve with Apollo is, I think they rush these kind of things. I think we need to go much slower and think more about what is a good framework to bring REST APIs onto a graph, because there are problems. Like, you need to solve N+1 problems.
Yes.
You need to solve authentication and yeah. So I don't know. I would love if we could move a little bit slower. And but yeah, it is what it is. And the harsh reality, unfortunately, is I think we will end up supporting it anyways, because at some point people want to migrate to Cosmo and they say, yeah, but we use these directives. And yeah, until then, maybe we figure out a better way to do REST with GraphQL. But so far, yeah, the other aspect, sorry for my
real quick, Jens, before we jump in there, we have a decent amount of viewers. Guys, stick around until the end, because we have a cool, I guess, a surprise or it's a bundle of knowledge that you don't want to miss and you definitely want to get access to. So Jens, continue your rant, but please stick around till the very end. We're going longer for just 10 minutes. In 5 minutes, we're going to announce something really cool that we spent a lot of time working on. Honestly, my fault, because Jens told me about it 3 months ago and it took forever, but I'll expand on that a little bit less. But Jens, continue on the REST connector. So I understand the technical implement, I don't know the word, but you know the word I'm trying to say. But I understand that part, but continue on the REST connectors.
Yeah. So I understand the desire, but at the business side, I can also talk to all our customers, and it doesn't seem to be the biggest problem to write a subgraph. There are many other problems like security. What I hear people talk a lot about is things like the provides directive and the requires directive, and like these directives in general, and how can we properly map dependencies between fields, and how can we achieve better type safety in subgraphs, and how can we achieve that if a subgraph says they implement a schema, how do you actually verify that they really implement that schema? So these kind of things. So the quality of subgraphs, the quality, the type safety, the developer experience of creating subgraphs. Yeah, we think there's a huge gap, and I think if we make building subgraphs better and easier and more type safe and all these kind of things, then there's the question of, is REST connected, is it really the biggest problem? Or yeah, so but this is our focus, this is our understanding of the market, and yeah, future will tell us if we're right or wrong or whatever.
Yeah, TBD, we'll figure it out. I haven't been hearing it from our customers, but then again, let's see where the market pulls us. I do know that one of the biggest use cases for GraphQL Federation is modernization efforts. It's companies that have grown super fast, they have a lot of tech debt, or that they're just significant behemoths like SAP or large big companies, and they want to modernize their stack. And they have a bunch of legacy old SOAP or REST APIs. I can see the use case there, but like you said, I think the approach is a little rushed. I think it needs to slow down a little bit, use these behemoths as a way to kind of move towards that. But I have the same thoughts with that. And then, guys, since we are almost at time.
Stefan.
Yes.
Just one thought.
Yes, continue. Is it on the REST connectors though?
Yeah, like, but it's the last puzzle.
What is it?
From conversations with, I would say, our biggest customers and users, I would say the big thing I learned is the most important thing is the schema. The most important thing is to have a good and well-designed schema. If we are building our schema in a way that wants to just connect REST APIs, there's a likelihood that we're leaking the REST API abstractions into our schema, because the REST APIs might dictate structure, they might dictate behavior that we actually don't like in the GraphQL world, or maybe it's not really compatible with GraphQL. So yeah, what we're aiming for is to help customers build great schema and to build a great API, and this might be conflicting with connectors. So that's my last thought on the topic.
Your mic drop. Boom. No, but very fair. And then last topic I want to discuss. And so I made a little joke. Jens had this idea, I would say November or December. But he's like, you know what we should do? We should interview all of our customers and we should create a state of federation report. Postman does it with their state of APIs report. And so I was like, yeah, Jens, that's a great idea. But a lot of stuff has been happening in between. It took me forever to get this out and finally into the public. But today, what we're excited to announce, let me present my screen,
You didn't like the idea, right?
No, I just thought because I will explain why. So I like the idea. The only thing is it's a little bit tricky because our market size isn't massive. So the state of APIs from Postman was like 45,000. And so we're giving you the full disclaimer. This State of GraphQL Federation report is based on insights from over 1,000 developers, architects, and CTOs, but from our base, our customer base. So full disclaimer. But that doesn't mean that the information inside it is not useful. So if you head over to our website, you'll see at the very banner that it says the State of GraphQL Federation. And you can quickly just enter in your email and you'll be able to get the report emailed over to you. But this is jam-packed with information of why GraphQL Federation. It comes from some great use cases, great customers that we have, as well as from comments and everything on them. Federation trends that we've seen. You'll also notice that we still have the disclaimer there that all the respondents in the survey are WonderGraph customers or are in the transition period of becoming a WonderGraph customer. But the information that is in there is jam-packed, and it also includes the future of Federation, where we see Federation going, and why customers have been adopting Federation. And so this is available today. It's a 48-page report. Just head over to the State of GraphQL Federation /2024, and you can get the report. Jens, any thoughts on this? I know why you wanted to do it. I think it's jam-packed with information. But what are your thoughts on the State of GraphQL Federation, especially with that Gartner quote, which is, let me scroll down to it. And I'll read it out loud because this has been a milestone in the Federation space, is that by 2027, more than 60% of enterprises will use GraphQL in production, up from less than 30%. But what's even more interesting is that 30% of these enterprises that are using GraphQL will be using GraphQL Federation. This is up less than 5%. So Jens, what are your thoughts on the State of GraphQL Federation? Why do we do it? What are the trends that we're seeing, and what can people expect from this report?
So our observation in the market is that when we started building Cosmo, we initially thought that most of our market would be coming from Apollo because we're the open source alternative to Apollo, or at least that's how we started. And we thought most of our market is coming from there. What we see, like this year, for example, that I don't know, 80-90% of our customers are coming from outside Apollo. So the market is expanding. There's a lot of traction, a lot of companies adopting Federation. And I wanted to start this initiative because I think it's super important to educate outside the people who are not yet on Federation, for them to understand what do the people think who are on Federation, how do they think about it, how do they adopt it, what are the benefits, why do they do the adoption, all this kind of stuff. So we want to share the knowledge from within the community, within the Federation community, with the wider API community, so that everybody can learn what are the impacts. And if, for example, you're a developer and you work at a big bank or whatever, and your company is not yet using Federation, you want to have material for your management to convince them this is the right direction, and other companies are doing it, it's successful, they have benefits. And so, yeah, I think it's super important to share this message. And also, you saw it with the disclaimer. So yeah, we interviewed all our customers, but what we really would love to see, if you sign up, we will include you in the next survey for this year, and we are really hoping to see also much bigger usage numbers for Apollo Federation, because ultimately Apollo is the market leader. And one very important message we want to get out is we see large organizations using both. So they use Apollo, they use Cosmo side by side. And I think it's important for a stable ecosystem that there's no one player, that there's no monopoly, but rather there are multiple players in the market. There is competition. to be honest, I think if anything, we really pushed Apollo very hard to work on some things and to improve stuff. So I think it's great for everybody to have competition. And yeah, the state of federation should show that federation is becoming an enterprise standard. Companies are adopting it, and yeah, we really hope that this helps you to convince your management and your company to adopt federation, whichever vendor you're going with.
Well said, Jan. And so you guys can find the report on our website. It's on the banner. So if you just head over to wndergraph.com, you can click on the banner and it'll take you there to get to the report. You can also head over to wndergraph.com/state of GraphQL Federation /2024. With that, that is the conclusion of another episode of The Good Thing. But Jens, what's the good thing?
We're back next week.
The good thing is we're back next week. We have some exciting stuff planned in the next couple of weeks. We have an exciting announcement coming in the next couple of weeks. So maybe we can hint a little bit about that. Look out for another case study coming out next week as well. Feature updates from February. We're going to have a massive blast of those. There was a lot of stuff that happened in February and just a lot of exciting stuff. As always, we are hiring. If you're really interested in GraphQL gateways or just high performance gateways, federation, or just working really closely with enterprise customers with developer tooling, please head over to our jobs page and apply. We are hiring. We have a person full-time now helping us recruit these. So we are growing and we are in a very good position. So if you want to join a really cool startup where we talk about cool stuff, build cool things, and we're just completely transparent about the entire process, take a look at WonderGraph. And as Jens mentioned, the good thing is we are back next week. Thanks, everybody. I just realized my shirt says I don't work here. I actually do work here.